There were 23 people around our table that Thanksgiving. 23 plates. 23 folding chairs my father had dragged up from the garage. My brother sat at the head of the table in his football jersey like he was already famous, like the whole night was a warm-up for the life everyone swore was coming to him. My mother poured the wine. My father sharpened the carving knife against the steel, slow, proud, the way he did every year. And every single person in that dining room already believed they knew which child in this family was worth something, and which one was just there to fill a seat. Then the phone rang. Not a cell phone. The old landline on the kitchen wall, the one my father refused to get rid of. It rang loud enough to cut straight through the football game on the TV and the little kids fighting over the rolls. My mother wiped her hands, walked over, and picked it up. Hello? Yes, this is Mrs. Rhodes. And then I watched the color drain right out of her face. Every bit of it. She turned and looked at me across a table full of people who had spent 17 years looking straight through me, and her voice came out cracked and small. You mean, my daughter? That was the moment. That was the exact second the lie my family had been living on for years finally started to split down the middle. If you have ever been made to feel small inside your own home, if you were ever the one they called practical while somebody else got called the future, then stay with me. Because you are going to want to see how this ends. But before I can tell you what that phone call did to my family, you need to understand how we got there. Let me take you back to the night it all started. Before I do, if a story about being underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you hit somewhere real for you, do me one favor. Hit that like button and subscribe, because these are the stories this channel tells, and it helps more than you know. And I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Team, country, city, kitchen table, night shift, wherever you are, drop it below so I know who I'm talking to tonight. Now, let me start where it really started. My name is Delia Rhodes. I'm 18 years old. And this is for every daughter who was handed the word practical like it was a gift, while she watched somebody else get handed the world. It was May. A Tuesday, around 7:30 in the evening. I was up in my room, refreshing my email over and over the way you do when you're waiting on something that could change your whole life. 3 days I'd been checking. 3 days. Then it landed. The subject line just said your score report is ready. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely tap the screen. It opened. 740 on math. 730 on the reading and writing. 1,470. I sat there and read it 4 times to make sure I wasn't dreaming it. It wasn't a perfect score. I knew kids online who'd cracked 1,500. But this was good. This was really good. Good enough for the schools I'd been quietly researching since I was a freshman. Good enough for the kind of place people in my town didn't usually come from. I printed it out. The paper was still warm when I picked it up off the tray, and I swear the edges curled a little, like even the page knew it was carrying something. I walked downstairs. My father was in his recliner watching football highlights, a beer sweating on the side table. My brother Colton was next to him on the couch, half watching the TV, half on his phone. I got my SAT score back, I said. My father didn't even turn his head all the way. How bad? That's the part that should have surprised me. It didn't. That's what happens when you grow up a daughter in a house that only knows how to see sons. 1470, I said. Let me tell you what I'd been doing while everybody in that house was watching game tape. For 2 months I'd been building something in the dark. 8 applications. The main form filled out. Every supplemental essay written and rewritten at midnight. I wrote about the star will my grandmother gave me when I was a little girl, a little brass planisphere, the kind you spin to line up the night sky with the date. I wrote about the summer I taught myself to code and built a program that tracked storms rolling in off the coast. I wrote about lying in the bed of my grandmother's truck as a kid, both of us pointing straight up, naming constellations until the mosquitoes drove us inside. 2 days before that living room conversation, at 9:40 at night, I had pressed submit on every last one of them. Online. Digital. Already gone. So when the night finally came that my mother found the paper copies, I want you to understand, I already knew they couldn't stop me. They just didn't know that yet. It was 2 days later. She walked into my room without knocking and saw the stack of pre-addressed envelopes on my desk. 8 of them. Backups I'd printed weeks before, from a version of this story where I still believed my parents might change their minds. She picked one up. Turned it over. Read the return address. What is this? College applications. She called for my father loud enough that I heard Colton's footsteps stop dead in the hallway. He was listening. My father came up, took one look, and said, "Bring them down." I followed them to the kitchen. My stomach was in a knot. Colton was at the table eating cold pizza, and when we walked in, his eyes met mine, and I could see it, he knew what was coming too. My mother spread the 8 envelopes across the counter like she was laying out evidence. She read the names off, one at a time, and every name landed like a small door slamming. "You've been wasting your time on this," she said. "It's not wasting." My father picked one up, read the sticker price out loud like it was a filthy word. $70,000 a year. You think we're made of money? It came in around 11 that same week. My phone buzzed on the nightstand and I almost didn't reach for it. I was wrung out, empty, done. But something made me grab it. The subject line stopped my heart cold. NASA Kennedy Space Center, internship decision. Let me back up, because I need you to understand when I'd applied. 2 months earlier, my grandmother had died. Her name was Frances. Everybody called her Grandma Franny. She dropped in her garden one spring morning, kneeling next to the tomato plants she'd been teaching me to grow since I was 7 years old, and by the time my grandfather got to her, she was gone. Heart. Sudden. No warning. And at her wake, standing in that funeral home while relatives I barely knew told stories about a woman none of them really understood, I pulled out my phone, and I filled out a NASA internship application right there. Transcript. An essay about why I wanted to help build the things that leave the ground. 2 teacher recommendations. I hit submit at midnight and figured I would never, ever hear back. Now here it was. I opened it. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, because my brain refused to believe the shape of the words. Congratulations. You have been selected for our summer internship program. Propulsion systems testing, paid position, $18 an hour, 40 hours a week. Please confirm your acceptance. I sat straight up in bed. Kennedy Space Center was 26 minutes from my house. 26 minutes. We lived right there on the Space Coast. I'd grown up watching rockets climb the sky over the tree line and never once thought I'd be allowed inside the fence. I could do this. I could do all of it, and nobody in that house would ever have to know. I hit reply and I typed one word. Yes. I sent it at 11:43 at night. Then I lay back and stared at the ceiling, at the little glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there when I was 9, and I thought, this is it. This is how I build something they cannot reach. 2 weeks later, on the first morning, I stood at a security gate at 6:30 in the morning with a granola bar in one hand and my learner's nerves rattling my whole body. And I want to tell you how a girl with no car and no permission got herself through that gate. Because it took help from the last person you'd expect. My grandmother had a neighbor. Mrs. Odette Bellamy. 79 years old, sharp as a tack, and she hadn't driven her old Buick in 3 years. I'd been mowing her lawn since I was 14, and when I asked, careful as anything, if I could borrow that car for the summer, she pressed the keys into my palm and said, "Don't you dare wreck it, baby. And eat something before you leave in the mornings. You're too thin." So that's how I did it. Every morning that whole summer, I borrowed an old woman's Buick and drove it to one of the most famous places on planet Earth. That first day, they took my photo for a badge. I looked terrified in it. I didn't care. They handed me a hard hat, safety glasses, a folder, and told me to report to Dr. Nathan Poole. He was waiting in his office. 50-something. Silver hair, wire glasses, a coffee mug on his desk that read "Failure is data." He had a reputation, I'd find out, brilliant, and allergic to people who wasted his time. He looked at my badge. Then at me. "You're the youngest intern we've had here in 6 years," he said. "Don't waste it." Then he walked me out to the test stands. I don't know how to make you feel what that was like. These enormous concrete towers, stories tall, wrapped in sensors and blast shields, scorched black from 100 burns. That afternoon, they fired an engine on a test run. And the ground shook. The sound wasn't a sound, it was a wall. It went straight through my chest and rattled my back teeth. I stood there in my too big hard hat, my safety glasses fogging up, and I thought, this is where I belong. Dr. Poole had to shout over the roar. "Everybody wants to go to space," he yelled. "We build the thing that gets them there. 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday. Data analysis. Simulations." I sat in on design reviews where engineers twice my age argued about nozzle angles and chamber pressure, and I wrote every word of it down. Every evening around 6, I drove Mrs. Bellamy's Buick back to her driveway, parked it exactly where it lived, and walked into my house smelling faintly of machine oil and floor they made his favorite. Lasagna, garlic bread, the whole spread. My father asked him 100 questions about footwork and drills and what the coaches said about his potential. My mother beamed at him across the table like he was lit from the inside. And I sat there and I watched my brother lie. Oh, he didn't mean to, exactly. But I could see it, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet my father's when he answered. The way his voice climbed a little higher when he said, "The coaches were really impressed with me." He was stretching the truth so far it might as well have snapped. He was performing a version of himself that my parents had invented, and he was exhausted from carrying it. Nobody asked about my summer. Not one person. Not one question. By the 8th week, Dr. Poole handed me my own project. A folder of research papers, some of them older than me, some published that same year, and he said, "See what you can do with this." I ran 47 simulations. I adjusted the same nozzle angle by 0.3 of a degree at a time. I tested fuel ratios. I rewrote a piece of the control math. And by the end, I had a number, a 12% improvement in efficiency over the standard design. It wasn't going to change spaceflight overnight. But it was real. It was, in Dr. Poole's words, publishable. "This is good work, Delia," he said, looking over my results, slow, careful. "Most graduate students don't produce this." I never told him I was 17. Never told him my parents had burned my college applications in a kitchen sink and laughed at my test score. I just let the numbers speak. On my last day, he called me into his office. "We've got something called the Pathways program," he said. "It's for students we want to keep. Internships during the school year. A road to a full-time job after you graduate. You interested?" "Yes," I said. Before he even finished the sentence. I checked my bank account that night. $7,200. 40 hours a week, 10 weeks, $18 an hour, minus taxes. I had earned more that one summer than my parents had spent on my brother's camp. Nobody knew. And somehow, that made it sweeter. That night at dinner, my mother said, "Delia, you ought to get a job. Something to help with the bills. Retail, maybe." I set my fork down. "I've been working." Where? She didn't even wait for the answer. Just nodded and went right back to talking about Colton's practice schedule. She'd asked the question the way you swat a fly, not because she wanted to know, but to make the buzzing stop. I let her have it. Because I was learning something powerful that summer. When you stop needing them to see you, they lose their only power over you. But my grandmother had seen me. My whole life, one person had. And when the leaves started turning, my grandfather made a phone call that would remind me exactly how much. I need to tell you about my grandmother, because she is the reason for all of it. Grandma Franny was the only person in my family who ever asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and then truly listened to the answer. When I said aerospace engineer, she didn't laugh, she didn't change the subject to my brother's stats. She just nodded like I'd told her the sun was coming up tomorrow. Obvious. Settled. She was the one who gave me the star wheel. That little brass planisphere. On the back, scratched in by hand, it says 4 words, for the one who keeps looking up. I've had it since I was 8. It sat on my desk through every one of those midnight essays. When I was little, she'd load me into the bed of her pickup on clear nights, and we'd lie back and she'd point. That one's Cassiopeia, the queen. And that little smudge? That's a whole other galaxy, baby. Everything you can build starts with being willing to look up. She used to say, "You're named after me, you know. My middle name is Francis. You've got to live up to it." She died in the spring. And 2 months after she was gone, at her wake, my grandfather Earl pulled me into a corner and pressed something into my hand. An envelope, sealed, my name across the front in her precise little handwriting. "Your grandma wanted you to have this," he said. His voice was rough. "But not yet. She told me you'd know when it was time." I tried to ask what it was. He just shook his head and tucked it back into his jacket. I didn't know it then, but that envelope was going to blow my family wide open. That fall, 2 more emails came, both in secret, both quiet as snow. "And I want you to type 1 word if you know what it feels like to hold good news you can't tell a single soul. If you've ever been the one everybody looked past, type invisible in the comments. Because for 1 more chapter, that's exactly what I let them believe I was." The first email came in October. My university portal, the top school on my list, updated with 1 line, "Your decision will be available December 15th. 2.5 months. I took a screenshot and buried it in a folder on my phone I'd labeled recipes, so nobody would ever click it. The second came a week later. "Dr. Poole. Your pathways paperwork is submitted. You're on the short list. You should hear by mid-November. The team still talks about your propulsion analysis, by the way. You've got a real future in this field. 2 secrets now. A shot at the best engineering school in the country, and a foot in the door at NASA. And not one person in my house had the faintest idea either one existed. I want to be honest with you about something, because it's not the prettiest part of me. Somewhere in there, part of me stopped wanting to just quietly slip away in August. Part of me, a part I'm not proud of, wanted them to say it out loud. In front of everyone. I wanted them to stand up at a full table and call me not college material in front of the whole family, so that I could prove them wrong in front of the whole family. I'm not proud of that. But it's true. So I waited. Then came the family dinner in late October, the one where my little cousin said the thing that broke something open in me. We had the whole crew over. My Aunt Deb, my Uncle Ray, their kids. My cousin Kayla, 16, sat next to me on the floor because all the good seats were taken. And halfway through, my aunt turned to me and asked, bright as anything, "So Delia, what's the plan for next year?" My mother answered before I could open my mouth. "Delia's taking a gap year. Not everybody's cut out for college right away. She'll figure it out. Get a job. Stay close. Not everybody's cut out for college. Even after 100 versions of that sentence, it still landed like a slap. Kayla leaned over and whispered, "But you're smart. Everybody knows you're the smart one. Why aren't you applying anywhere?" Before I could answer, my father's voice cut across the table. "Tests don't mean much anymore, Kayla. Real world's about grit. Some people are book smart. Some people are life smart. Let me tell you about my brother's big season. The one my father sold to anyone who'd hold still long enough to listen. Colton made varsity. But he wasn't the starter. There was a senior quarterback ahead of him who was, truly, good, the kind of good that made my brother's Division I potential look like a bedtime story. Colton was the backup. Third on the depth chart, if we're counting. My father never mentioned that part. First game of the season, the whole family in the bleachers. Our team was up by 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, the game long over, when the coach finally put my brother in. Garbage time. It didn't matter anymore. Colton handed the ball off twice, then threw one pass that sailed 5 yards short and hit the grass. The clock ran out. In the parking lot afterward, my father was on the phone with somebody. "Yeah, Colton had some great plays out there tonight. Really showed what he's got. I think there were some scouts in the stands." None of it was true. And that night, at home, I was in the kitchen getting water when the phone rang, my father's cell this time. I watched his face light up. "Yes, this is Mr. Rhodes, about Colton?" "Film? How much?" A pause. "That seems steep, but, yeah. Every kid needs one these days. Send me the info." He hung up. My mother came in. "Who was that?" "Recruiting service. They make highlight films, send to colleges. $3,200. I almost laughed. Because I recognized exactly what that was. It wasn't a scout. It wasn't a coach. It was a sales call. Some company that buys lists of high school athletes and cold calls the parents, selling overpriced tape to families desperate enough to believe. But my parents would pay $3,200 they didn't have for a video that would sit on a website no college coach would ever open, because they needed it to be true. And here's the part that stayed with me. Months later, over coffee, my brother told me something. Back in July, he'd been hunting for his phone charger in the kitchen and found my backpack open on a chair. My NASA badge was sitting right there on top. My photo. The center's name printed across it. He picked it up. He understood exactly what it meant. And he put it back, zipped my bag, and never said one word. He kept my secret. The only person in that house who knew the truth, and he protected me. My brother wasn't the villain of this story. He was just a kid buried under a future he never once asked for. And in November, my 2 secrets stopped being secrets to me. Because the answers finally came. Mid-November. I was sitting in calculus when my phone buzzed in my backpack. I wasn't allowed to check it, but I glanced. NASA. I waited for the bell, walked straight to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened it with shaking hands. Congratulations. You have been selected for continuation in our Pathways student internship program. Spring schedule available. $20 an hour. I sat down right there on the edge of the seat and typed back, available. Thank you. I accept. Then I just breathed for 5 whole minutes. $20 an hour. The pipeline to a real career. NASA wanted me back. 5 days later, the big one. I was in my room, door locked, curtains shut, laptop on my bed. My internet was slow, small town slow, and the portal loaded one agonizing line at a time. Then the first word appeared, and it just hung there on the screen while the rest of the page caught up. Congratulations. I stopped breathing. Then the rest came. We are delighted to offer you admission to the class of 2030. I scrolled down with my heart in my throat. And there it was. Financial aid. Need-based grant. $68,000 a year. Work study. A tiny student contribution. Added up over 4 years and it came to more than $270,000 in aid. I would graduate from one of the best engineering schools on the planet, debt-free. I sat on my bed in the dark, the screen glowing on my face, and I felt something crack open inside me. Not the bad kind of crack. The kind a seed makes when it finally decides to grow. I wanted to run downstairs and shove that screen into their faces. See? I'm not the one who isn't cut out for this. I'm the one they want. But I didn't. I took a screenshot. I saved it. I closed the laptop. And I went down to dinner like nothing on earth had happened. My father was on the phone. Yeah, Colton's got a real shot this year. That highlight film's gonna blow the coaches away. Cost us $3,200, but it's an investment. I sat down. My mother had made spaghetti. Nobody asked about my day. Nobody asked if anything had changed. I ate my dinner and thought about a campus 2,000 miles away, about a future I'd built in total silence while they watched game tape. And I made a decision, sitting at that table. I wasn't going to tell them. I was going to let them find out the way everybody else would. And Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. If you're still with me, if you've made it this far and your heart is pounding for what's coming, do me one favor and type named in the comments. You'll understand why in a few minutes. Because everything, was about to come down to a name. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. A thick envelope came in the mail from the university, a welcome packet, glossy, heavy, a whole folder about my new life. I grabbed it off the porch before anybody could see and hid it in the back of my closet, behind boxes of clothes I never wore. My grandfather called to confirm he was coming for Thanksgiving. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "How you holding up?" "I'm good, Grandpa." "Really?" He had a way of asking that made you want to tell the truth. Then, quiet, "Your grandmother would be proud of you. You know that?" My throat closed up. For what? For being you. For not letting them make you small. He cleared his throat. I'll see you Thursday. Got something for you. Something your grandma left. The letter? Yeah. Time's about right, I think. I hung up and sat there holding the phone, thinking about the truck bed, the constellations, the star wheel on my desk. For the one who keeps looking up. My mother, meanwhile, was in a full-blown planning storm. 23 confirmed guests. Yellow legal pads covered in lists. A 24-pound turkey. Folding tables from the garage. This family makes Thanksgiving from scratch, she kept saying. This family. Like we were one thing. Like we all wanted the same things. And that whole time, 3 weeks of it, I couldn't sleep. Because part of me wanted the confrontation, wanted the whole family in one room when the truth came out. And I hated that part of me a little. But I also couldn't let it go. Thursday came. 23 people. My mother set my grandmother's chair empty at one end of the table with her framed photo beside it. Franny in the garden, smiling, holding a tomato she'd just picked. White roses around the frame. Her favorite. I looked at that photo and I thought, you loved this. Not the way they think. You loved the people. You loved me. And you knew none of them were telling the truth. Then my grandfather walked in last through the door, and he held me longer than usual, and he whispered in my ear, I'll give it to you after dinner. It's time. My heart was slamming. Because it was almost time, for all of it. And none of us at that table had any idea that the thing about to break the whole night open was sitting silent on the kitchen wall. "2:30 in the afternoon. Everyone finally seated. 23 plates. The turkey carved, the candles lit, my grandmother's photo watching over all of it. My father stood to say grace. We bowed our heads. Lord, we thank you for this food, for this family, for another year. We're especially grateful for Colton's success this season, and for the opportunities ahead of him. Guide him toward the right path. Amen. Not one word about me. Not even we're grateful for all our children. Just Colton. Just his season. Just his future. I kept my head down. I didn't want anybody to see my face. Then the phone rang. Loud, shrill, that old landline on the kitchen wall. Everyone froze for half a second. My mother squinted at the caller ID across the room. Unknown number, she said. Area code I don't recognize. It's Thanksgiving, my father said. Let it go. It rang again. Same number. My grandfather, gentle, might be important, Sharon. My mother crossed the room and picked it up. Hello? Yes, this is Mrs. Rhodes. And then her face changed. Confusion first. Then something underneath it. I'm sorry, who is this? The whole table had gone silent. Forks in the air. 23 people listening. You're trying to reach whom? Her voice cracked, just a hair. And then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it, you mean, my daughter? Every single pair of eyes in that room turned to me. All of them. Even the 2-year-old on Aunt Deb's lap went still. My mother pressed the phone to her chest, covered the mouthpiece with her palm, and stared at me across the table. Delia, she whispered. Did you apply to college? I stood up. I walked across the room. I put my hand out. I'll take it. Her hand was shaking as she gave it to me. "This is Delia Rhodes." The voice on the line was warm, professional. "Hello, Delia. This is the Office of Financial Aid. I'm so sorry to call on a holiday. We've been trying to reach you for a few days. I just wanted to personally confirm your need-based grant of $68,000 a year. Is that amount acceptable to you?" 23 people, hanging on every word out of my mouth. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "It is. Wonderful. And we'd love to have you and your family at our admitted students reception next month. Will you be able to attend?" "I'll be there." "Perfect. And Delia, congratulations. Your application was exceptional. We are thrilled to have you in the class of 2030. I hung up. I set the phone down on the table. The silence was so thick you could have carved it like the turkey. My father stood up slowly. His face had gone dark red. What in the world just happened? I looked around the table. My mother. My father. My brother. My grandfather, who was, I realized, quietly smiling. "I got in," I said. "Full ride. $68,000 a year. That's over $270,000, over 4 years. My Uncle Ray, God bless him, did the math out loud before he could stop himself. 270 grand. Gasps went around the table. Aunt Deb's hand flew to her mouth. "You went behind our backs," my father said, his voice tight. "I told you I wanted to apply," I said, steady. "You burned my envelopes. In the sink. Remember? We said no," my mother whispered. "I didn't need your money. I submitted every application online. 2 days before you lit the match. You didn't stop anything. You just didn't know." My brother's head snapped up. 2 days before. I nodded. And that's when the second phone rang. And this one is the part one still can't believe. It was my grandfather's cell. He pulled it out of his jacket, looked at the screen, and said, calm as still water, "It's Harold Pruitt." My mother's voice was barely there. "Who?" "Your mother's estate attorney." My father sank back into his chair like the strings had been cut. My grandfather answered, listened, then put it on speaker and set the phone right down on the table, next to my grandmother's photo. And a deep, measured voice filled that dining room. "Good afternoon, everyone. Harold Pruitt, attorney for the estate of Francis Rhodes. I apologize for interrupting your holiday. Earl asked me to call at this exact time. This concerns a trust Mrs. Rhodes established before she passed." My father's voice was hoarse. "What trust?" "Your mother set aside $150,000, to be split equally between her 2 grandchildren. $75,000 each. But there were conditions." A pause. "Each grandchild receives their share only upon acceptance to an accredited 4-year university. Not community college. Not trade school. A 4-year institution." The room had gone dead quiet. Even the kids. As executor, I've been tracking both grandchildren's progress. As of 2 weeks ago, Delia Rhodes was accepted to a 4-year university. "Is that correct, Delia?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Then Delia qualifies for immediate distribution. $75,000. The funds will transfer within 5 business days." Uncle Ray, quietly, doing the math again, 75 grand. My father found his voice. "And Colton? What about Colton? Has Colton been formally accepted to an accredited 4-year university?" Silence. "Has he received a formal acceptance letter of any kind?" A longer silence. My father, barely a whisper, "Not yet." "Then his share remains in trust until he qualifies." My mother's voice broke apart. "Mother never told us about this. She specifically asked me not to," Mr. Pruitt said. His voice was gentle, but there was iron under it. "She told me, and I'm quoting her directly, they'll try to interfere. They'll try to move the money where they think it should go. Don't let them. The words hit that room like a dropped plate. Then my grandfather reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. Old. Yellowed. My name on the front in that precise, familiar hand. There's one more thing, Mr. Pruitt said through the speaker. Mrs. Rhodes left a letter, to be read aloud when the first grandchild qualified. Earl, are you ready? Yes, my grandfather said. And his voice was thick now. He broke the seal. He unfolded a single sheet of paper. And he looked at me. You want me to read it? I nodded. I couldn't have spoken if my life depended on it. He cleared his throat. Earl, if you're reading this, the kids are grown, and I've only got one thing to say. Delia is the one. My breath caught in my chest. She's got Francis in her. Quiet, sharp, built to last. I watched that girl for 17 years, and I saw everything the rest of you looked straight past. She doesn't have to be loud to be extraordinary. She doesn't need anybody's permission to be brilliant. The money is hers the day she earns it, and she will. Don't you dare let them waste her. Tell her I'm proud. Tell her she's named after me for a reason. And tell her the stars were always meant for her. Francis. Silence. A full, aching stretch of it. Then my Aunt Deb started to cry. Then Mrs. Alvarez, our old neighbor who'd been a guidance counselor for 30 years, she was crying too. Then Kayla. Then Uncle Ray's voice, cracking on nothing. My grandfather folded the letter, careful as anything, and handed it to me. I read it again in my grandmother's own handwriting. Delia is the one. She's got Francis in her. And it landed on me, fully, for the first time, that I was named for her. Delia Frances Rhodes. She'd handed me her own name. She'd seen something in me before I was old enough to see it in myself, and she'd left me the proof, sealed in an envelope, waiting for the exact right day. The tears came then. First time since the spring. First time since they burned everything in that sink. But these weren't those tears. These were the other kind. My grandfather pulled me into a hug in front of everyone and whispered, "She always knew. From the day you were born, she told me, that one's going to change the world, Earl. Don't you dare let them clip her wings." One by one, the family stood. Aunt Deb came and hugged me. Then Mrs. Alvarez, whispering, "I knew it. I always knew you could." Then Kayla. Then Uncle Ray. Even my mother's father, a man who'd barely glanced at me all day, got up, walked over, and said, "I'm sorry, kid. I should have paid more attention." My parents didn't move. They sat at that table while the whole room came to me, and they didn't get up. My mother was crying, but she stayed in her chair. My father stared at the wood grain like it might rescue him. And then my brother stood up. His chair scraped hard against the floor. "I'm sorry," Colton said. His voice was shaking. "Sit down," my father said. "This isn't about you." "Yeah, it is." My brother's voice climbed, and steadied, and got loud. "It's about all of us. It's about what we did to her." He turned to the whole table. "You spent $10,000 on me. Camps. Tape. That recruiting service. And I'm a third-string backup who's played 12 snaps all year, all of them in garbage time, in games that were already over. No scouts. No offers. Not even the community college wants me for football, because I'm not that good. I never was." The table was frozen. "She did all of this on her own," he said, pointing at me, his voice breaking clean in half. "Well, you paid for a future I don't even have. She got into the best school in the country. She worked at NASA. You told her she wasn't college material. You made me stand in that kitchen and watch you burn her applications." He was crying now, openly. "You wanted me to be something I'm not so badly that you couldn't even see." She was already flying. He turned and walked out of the room. Nobody moved. We could hear him in the next room, trying to pull himself together. My grandfather looked at me. "You can stay with me," he said. "The spare room's yours as long as you want it. I don't want to cause problems." His voice went to ice. "You are not the problem. You never were." My father stood up. "We need to talk." "Not tonight," my grandfather cut in. "This is my house, tonight, and that is my granddaughter, who just found out her dead grandmother believed in her more than her living parents ever managed to. So no, Wayne. Not tonight. Tonight, she comes home with me." I went upstairs. I packed a bag. The laptop. The welcome packet from the back of my closet. My NASA badge. And the star will off my desk, for the one who keeps looking up. My brother was sitting on the bottom step when I came down. Red eyes, swollen face. "I saw your badge," he said quietly. "Back in July. I should have said something." I sat down next to him. "You kept my secret. That mattered more than you know." He looked at me. "What you did, building all of that where nobody could see it, that's the bravest thing I've ever watched anybody do." I hugged him. He hugged back, the first real one since we were little kids. Then I walked past my parents, and I didn't say a word, and I didn't look back. Here's what happened after. My parents called 14 times in the first 3 days. I let everyone go to voicemail. "We need to talk."